Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to the Wild Winter Women YouTube channel, episode 8. I'm Leah, and this is Laura Rushfeldt, and we're here tonight to talk about the Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is still going on up in Alaska. It started nearly a week ago, and tonight is the evening of Saturday, March 1st. Laura's here with us tonight to talk about our experience. She was out volunteering at the Finger Lake checkpoint for 5 days, for the first 5 days of the race. And she is a past racer herself. And we're happy to have her. So thanks for coming out, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Also, Laura was able to provide a lot of photos and information to the Wild Winter Women, like social media team that was putting stuff out on social media, or that is putting stuff out on social media. So she was a great connection to have at that point in the race to be able to send us information. That was a huge help. So Laura, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about some of your experience at the checkpoint?
Sure. So I'm Laura Rushfeldt. I'm out of New England. I live in Boston. And I found out about ITI through, I'm a hiker and do winter camping. And I was camping, went more and more into colder weather. And I was like, well, I should probably take a course so I don't kill myself and my dogs. And so I found out that they do this camp that's on the Iditarod Trail. And I said, that sounds cool. So I just signed up, not really knowing a ton about the race. And then came out of the camp like, well, I have to try now. So I skied last year, the 350. And it was very different weather last year than this year. A lot of wind and a lot of real cold. So I ended up scratching and rowing with some frostbite. And totally the right call for me. And so this year I thought rather than trying to race again, I would come back as a volunteer. So I got hooked up as one of the 2 volunteers at the Finger Lake checkpoint for ITI 2025.
Awesome.
So you want me to talk a little bit about kind of getting out to the checkpoint and how we got it set up and stuff? And I think
sure.
We have some that we can pull up.
I can share my screen.
Perfect. Sorry, I'm clearly still in Alaska, so I'm showing off with my backdrop and one screen and no technology abilities here. But yeah, so we had 2 volunteers at the checkpoint. One went out with the trail crew, kind of breaking trail back out to Roan. And I flew out on Sunday, the day the race started. Due to circumstances of last year and a windstorm destroying the race tent, I actually was flying out with the tent, the new tent, and some of the other supplies. So we flew out in this beautiful, tiny little plane, absolutely stuffed to the gills, out of the Lake Hood Seaplane Base, flew up to Finger Lake, and this plane flies really low. So it's pretty cool to fly in this one compared to the Beaver that I flew back out of Roan from. But yeah, so we got into Finger Lake about noon. And yeah, you can see how small the plane was. That was just the pilot on the left and me sitting there on the right. Got to get the selfie it's pretty cool actually. While you fly up, you parallel the race course for a big chunk of it. You kind of miss the Squentna turn, but then you fly right over Shell Lake, and then you can kind of see Finger Lake coming up in the distance, like sitting right in the kind of mountains surrounding all the way around it, right in the shoulder of the mountains. So it was beautiful on the approach. And we got to do a flyover, actually. You can see there, we went right over the trail. You could see it kind of coming in.
Cool.
That's back, south. And then, sorry, I didn't edit a ton of these, but that's there you can see the Finger Lake. So then that's when we landed on the lake. There's a runway, and a welcome committee of snow machines comes and gets me and all the supplies. And they had already built a platform for the tent, which was hugely helpful.
Looks like a great welcoming crew with this dog.
Yeah, there was a whole crew of dogs. So the lodge has a resident dog, a couple retired sled dogs, and then 12 additional team sled dogs that give guest tours. So there was a whole crew of sled dogs there, which is pretty fun.
Great.
Unfortunately, during the race, they locked them all away so that they won't, hassle the racers. It's probably for the best, but folks don't get to interact with them.
Yeah.
Actually, Klaus, who's one of the foot athletes, there's a dog also named Klaus, one of the sled dogs. So the caretakers of the lodge were cheering for Klaus and watching his dot move the whole way because they said, oh, he's got the same name as our sled dogs. And when Klaus got to the checkpoint and I told him that, he lit up. He was so excited that there was a sled dog named after him.
Oh, that's so cute.
Because there'll be a Klaus on the trail.
Cool. That's awesome. And this checkpoint, would you say it's like mile about like 130, or like where in the course do you think it is?
It's listed on the track leaders as mile 123, and it's listed in the athlete guide as mile 125. So it's right around there. And what's cool about it is it's kind of the first remote checkpoint. So, there's Butterfly, which day one, you're kind of right there. Everyone can snow machine in, lots of fans come and former racers. And then you're through the Hooligans, which is basically a roadhouse, and there's a place to stay, and you can get a room and you can get a meal. This checkpoint is just a wall tent sitting on a lake, so it feels very remote. We best services we can there, and there is a nice lodge there, but the athletes don't interact with the lodge itself. So it's the first one where if you go through in the dark, you kind of feel like you're in the middle of nowhere a little bit.
Cool.
So so I got there at noon, and I had a goal to get the tent set up before the race started, which we made by about 15 minutes. Because we knew that the lead pack was going to be really, really fast this year due to the conditions. So some years you don't get anybody for a whole day at this checkpoint, but we were worried we might get athletes as soon as midnight. So we had to get everything in and get it all set up. Thankfully, like I said, that platform was already built for us, which was great. And then you're just racing around, running, trying to get everything together. It's like, well, we don't know if this tent's even going to be warm by the first athletes get there. But, yeah, sorry, these aren't that well edited. So there you can see it all up. It has a wood stove that sits in the corner, and then there's a hole in the tent to let it vent safely. I don't think the stove's even in yet in this photo, but we have some more a little bit. But it's a 16 by 20. So there's your luxurious accommodation.
And it looks like lots of guy lines to stake it down.
Yeah, we spent an hour putting up the tent and 3 hours installing all the guy lines.
Wow.
Because it was the first time, so you tie them all in. It was all good. But we thought, okay, it's going to be really windy, so we got to secure it down really well. Stay tuned about that, because it was not really windy this year. It was very, very, very pleasant and pretty cool the whole time we were out there.
Nice.
And then our athlete food. So you can see here, one of 2.5 bins full of burritos. Every flavor burrito you can imagine. We did have a couple people ask us if they were homemade, because they said they tasted so delicious, which I think just goes to show you how much a hot meal being handed to you during the race impacts your mood. I didn't sample the burritos, but they were a hit.
Yeah.
And then the volunteers had these little staff cabins to stay in. So this was my little staff cabin, which actually that window looked straight out on the trail as folks were exiting the checkpoint and heading on to Puntilla, which was pretty cool to be staying, 10 feet from the Iditarod Trail.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is fun about this checkpoint is like when you get there, like, and you see how much snow there is.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. When you get to this checkpoint and you see the drifts of snow, like the snow that's come off the roof, you're like, holy smokes, there's so much snow here.
Yeah, it makes it hard to believe that there was no snow around Butterfly and then no snow north of Roan, because at these checkpoints that are right up against the mountains, they just get hammered. The caretakers, who were hugely helpful in us getting everything set up and running the checkpoint, a nice couple there, they said they got 4 feet of snow in one night a few weeks ago, and they were still working to clear off the roofs of all the outbuildings.
Yeah, that's so cool.
You had to go down like 5 snow steps to get down to the outhouse because it was like buried in the earth. So there's a tent all set up. we couldn't find our official checkpoint sign, but we found this sign screwed to the side of the lodge. So we just unscrewed it and used it as our sign, which thank you, Tony, for your ingenuity.
Yeah.
But this, we also hung twinkle lights so you can see it from all the way across the lake. So you don't get confused to go to the lodge, because the lodge also looks you see it prominently across the lake. So we were very careful to keep all the lights off at the lodge so that folks wouldn't get confused where they go. And that's what the lodge looks like. So we had time for a little fun before the first racers got in. We got to go for a little sled dog ride with the team. That butt of the last dog, that's Klaus.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we were running up and down the finger of Finger Lake, which is pretty cool. And I had to put that in there. This is a famous from the Iditarod sled dog race. The signs that used to be at the top of the Happy River steps. Infamous feature leaving this checkpoint where you go down really, really steep drop, like switchbacks. So that sign used to be on the trail for decades.
Cool.
Now a decoration.
It looks like in the background is like the industrial kitchen kind of stuff.
Yeah, so this is like where they cook the nice meals for the guests when the lodge is open. The lodge was sold a couple of years ago, and it's undergoing a full gut renovation overhaul over a couple of years. Right now, there's no staff except for the caretakers and no guests. So we have the volunteers have a little more liberty to run about the place and use it, which made our lives a lot easier for burritos and coffee and what have you to keep everybody down at the checkpoint tent.
Cool.
So then we were all ready for the first racers to come in, and when we turned the lights on because we knew they were coming, the northern lights turned on right at the same time, which was pretty awesome. We had amazing every night. Folks were seeing it as they came in.
Wow.
There you go.
Beautiful.
It was about 8 a.m. and our first racers, sorry, this might be a little chopped up over the call, but our first racers came in right about at 2 a.m., 4 lights all together, and we were laughing because they had to ride single track off of the main trail over to our tent. So we had this little choo-choo train of lights.
It's fun that they were all still together at that point.
Oh yeah, they were definitely just kind of knew that they needed to get a good pace in, and actually a lot of folks were like, the whole rest of the race they were asking us like, what did the leaders do? Did the leaders take a nap here? I bet they were here for 30 seconds. Did the leaders have a burrito? Did the leaders do that? I was like, okay guys, settle down. But they came in and took a long break, like 90-minute break with us, and put their feet up and kind of sat around the stove and chatted about if they thought they were on pace to break the record and what the conditions were going to look like beyond. And they knew they were on pace, but they probably wouldn't be able to do it just due to the increasing snow and some of the difficulty that was coming up. So
cool. Oh, here they are.
A few photos of everybody hanging out, drying off, and eating a lot of food. Just all the top folks that came through, the top 10, they just opened their drop bags and just ate half of what was in it and dumped the rest and moved on. It was just calorie recovery time.
Yeah.
There were a number of folks wearing helmets this year. A lot more than I remember last year because of, I think it was so icy at so many of the parts, just for safety. And a couple of the skiers were wearing helmets as well for the same reasons.
Cool.
Yeah. This was novel at the time. That got to be pretty normal. There you go. Lead pack heading off at 3:30 in the morning. So we both volunteers, we both stay up the whole first night to watch everybody come through, which I came to regret later because it meant I stayed up there basically 36 hours straight. I slept hours. But yeah, we had Leah and then Kate, about 45 minutes separate, 30 minutes separate in their arrival. So they overlapped for a little bit before Leah headed on. And they had a nice chat about riding around bikes in Tucson, and just, took a little bit of a breather, and that was nice. A lot of calories, a lot of catching up on the drinks.
Mm-hmm.
Then Leah was on her way. She went on to win. So that was
Mm-hmm.
exciting. And then we started having waves that stayed a bit longer. So we had the tent set up. So on the right side of the tent, we had 8 sleeping berths where you have to lay like sardines, one next to another, and kind of cram in there. We ended up numbering them so we could keep track of the order that people laid down in case we had to bump people. But we actually ended up never having to bump someone the whole race. I think the conditions were so nice that a lot of people would get into the checkpoint and want to come in and dry their stuff. But if they saw a full tent, they knew they'd sleep more soundly outside the tent. So there was a lot of folks that just bivvied outside next to the tent rather than the 7th or 8th sleeping berth and deal with the snores and the noises and the folks coming and going. So anyone who wanted to sleep in the tent got to sleep in there as long as they wanted this year.
Do you know like what the most number of people is who were there at one time?
Yeah. There was one point where we had 7 asleep in the tent, and then 3 on the left side of the tent bivvying out, and then 5 on the right side bivvying out. So that many, whatever math that is, 7 plus 3 plus 5.
I think 15.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Something like that.
Yeah,
cool.
Folks would have a little tent, or they would have a little bivvy sack, or sometimes they just put their sleeping bag on their sleeping pad and just sleep out if they knew it wasn't going to snow or rain and it wasn't windy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a personal preference. And a couple of the couples that were traveling together would just bring a 2-person tent. They kind of split the load, because they could share some stuff. So
yeah,
that way they didn't have to do separate setups.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And we had another day after day of this weather, just beautiful sunrises, beautiful sunsets, not a cloud in the sky, and not a single gust of wind. It felt like Margaritaville. The main story was the weather.
Yeah.
And everyone who did the race last year, all they could say was, I can't even believe this is the same checkpoint. Like I could not fathom how different it was. 2024, there was 3 straight days of basically a ground blizzard, like a windstorm, with winds that were so strong. They're still doing repairs at the lodge for chimneys that got torn out of the buildings. It destroyed the ITI tent. So that's why we have a new tent. I mean, volunteers last year had to stand in the corner points of the tent and hold it down so it didn't get carried away during the worst of the windstorm. The
Mm-hmm.
other checkpoint had their chimney pulled out and they had to chase it into the woods. So this year it was just like folks were just laying in the sun and enjoying the weather and soaking it up, which was really nice. But on the other hand, it got quite warm by late morning. And there was a lot of strategizing in the tent about, should I sleep now and wait for the trail to firm up overnight? How late do we think it's going to be before the trail rehardens? Like, should I push now and then take a nap later? Should I sleep until early morning? And so there's a lot of kind of balancing how to enjoy the weather, but use it to your advantage to move efficiently up trail and not get stuck in really soft, soppy, slow conditions due to that warm snow that'll soften it day after day after day.
Yeah.
So I think it led to folks changing their strategy to kind of work around that weather.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one thing that surprises me so much is like there was so much concern, I would say over the last couple of months in Alaska, just about the weather conditions, about the warm conditions, and then, the river, just all the stuff. And like, I feel like in the end, like it's been a great course, other than the tussocks. Like the tussocks have caused a lot of frustration and still are. But other than that, like it's been like all told, I would say pretty good, pretty great conditions.
I think the race got pretty lucky with timing because I think there was before where the Yetna was in pretty rough shape and the Cusco up by Roan in terms of the river crossings. But it ended up working out pretty well. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's been very few scratches, which I think we're going to touch up here, but I think like some of the least in a long time for racist history, which kind of speaks to not that it's easy. It's never easy.
Right.
That it's passable.
Yeah. Yeah, only 4 scratches, and I don't think we've seen any in the last like 48 hours.
Yeah.
They're all from before.
Everyone's pushing through now. I'm sorry, I probably put too many photos in here. I don't have new things to say about them all. But
no, they're great.
We added a feature this year for those who weren't on the race. We did stovetop quesadillas. So we spoiled y'all. You got burritos, and then you could have stovetop quesadillas on top of that, which was they were a hit generally. So I think it was nice to have something simple. You know, when folks are racing, sometimes they don't want to eat exotic flavors or really complicated food. So just cheese up in a tortilla on the stovetop hit the spot for some folks.
Yeah, definitely. I did that last year at Roan. I packed a little package of flour tortillas and then some shredded cheese in my drop bag so I could put it on the stove at Roan.
Well, we had bags of shredded cheese that big. And
nice.
Industrialized Costco things of quesadilla. There was a lot of food.
Yeah, that's great.
And just some, folks would sit near the fire and kind of dry their gear and get ready there, away from where folks were sleeping. We had hot water and cold water, coffee, some booze, the burritos. So we had a whole little kind of kitchen set up, which some folks weren't aware of. When they walk in, they said, "Oh, we can get hot water here?" It's like, yeah, we're a service establishment here this year.
And you had all the drop bags, people's first drop bag.
Yeah. We had a lot. So I think because it's so fast, people hadn't gone through what they were carrying, on their sleds or on their bikes. So even I felt like compared to even past years, more folks were just taking their drop bags, opening them up, and maybe taking out one thing and then just dumping the whole rest. So we had bins and bins and bins of discards that folks could dig through and take whatever they needed or wanted. A little variety. Variety is the spice of life. So,
yeah, definitely. Oh, sorry. Those are cool. I like these bags. Those are fun and colorful.
That's Carl Schiller. He is from New Zealand. He's an Australian from New Zealand, and he brought a gift for each checkpoint, which was a giant, thick, honking bar of New Zealand chocolate.
Oh, how nice!
Very sweet. We enjoyed it the whole rest of the time there.
That's great. Yeah. George Adams, who most recently biked to Nome in 2023 with me, he's a Kiwi but living in Australia. So kind of the opposite of Carl.
I think Carl knows.
Oh, okay.
That's how Carl turned on to the race somehow.
Oh, great.
Small world.
Yeah.
Carl and I went to ITI camp together in 2023. So that's partly how I know his story there. Just some photos. Approach trail, you can see there, the mountains that the racers move along as they're moving up towards Finger Lake, and then they turn away from those mountains and come to us, and then continue up another spine of mountains that brings them into Puntilla. So it's a beautiful 2-day approach up into the Alaska range, especially when you see it and you're not coming in at 1 a.m.
Yeah,
and there you can see the kitchen set up. Sorry, I didn't have a full chance to edit these. A lot of smiles, everyone coming in, just enjoying the sunny day.
And here, what he's done is put pink ties on his boots so no one accidentally, just for the viewers, so no one accidentally like grabs the wrong boot, just because a lot of people have similar looking boots. Is that Julie?
Yeah, Kara.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Great.
If this becomes a name quiz, though, I'm going to be in trouble. We had 2 planes land of fans. So this was the first of 2 groups on 2 different days that flew in, just private folks who knew someone in the race or just are fans of the race from past years that they wanted to come by and see the tent, say hi. They gave us cookies. Took our trash. They were super great. So we
Wow.
like our.
That's so cool and so Alaska. I love it.
It was like, oh, can you tell us where this athlete is? And we'll go find him up the trail and just find a place to land on a lake somewhere so we can give him a cookie or say hi or whatever. It felt very intimate, which was fun.
Awesome. That's cool. And of course, here's Maya in the background. She was the fourth woman on bike finisher.
And that's Henriette Beal coming in with a grin on her face.
Mm-hmm.
Jillian Smith, she's Canadian. She was super nice, excited to keep going. And just a video shows the tent, so you can see the whole setup. Yeah, it was
Kendall Park and the Italians.
And Henriette was taking a nap there. So there you got to get a sense. That's lap of luxury when you're out there.
Yeah. Yeah, Tiziano is warming up by the fire, and then Willie is over here eating.
And we needed to keep that fire really cranking so folks' gear would dry expeditiously. Yeah. But it was like 35 on the lake. So the tent was getting quite warm. We were just tying the flaps wide open during the day sometimes to let air in, just so that it wouldn't be too warm in there. Folks were coming in and being like, warm. I'm just going to hang out outside. There's the Italian. They were, oh my gosh. Can I tell a quick story?
So this is, Roberto Tiziano, Willie, and then this is Perry Jewett from South Dakota. Yeah, what's your story? Yeah,
they had a couple others that were with them as well that were, had added to the group. A Spanish, and I forget his name.
It's like,
yeah. So they have like a core group that always travels together, and then they're super fun, and they're also good at managing their schedule. So folks just like to travel with them. I think they had 10 at one point on the trail at this year. So they chat in Italian, and they make the plan, and then they would announce the plan to the tent. So they said, okay, we will be leaving this checkpoint at 5 p.m. So if you want to continue with us, be ready outside at 5 p.m. And for this section of the trail, every 30 minutes, we will stop for 3 to 5 minutes to stretch. And someone said, oh, why are we stopping why are we stopping every half hour? And they said, for a group hug. Let's practice now. So I took this photo of them practicing their group hug. But I just really appreciated that they kind of laid out the plan. And then at 4:58, there were 7 folks out front ready to ride out in a caravan and continue up the trail together. So
absolutely. Yeah. Like, forget any stereotypes you've ever heard about Italian people. They are prompt.
Oh, they run it. They were.
Yeah. So I rode with these.
Someone had to run and take a shot of Fireball because they said, well, it's 5 o'clock. But then they got on the road. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I rode with these 3 on the 3 Italians to Nome in 2023. And they were so much fun to travel with and so prompt. And it was just a great experience. The other thing about Willie is he runs a guiding company, and Roberto is one of his guides. And so, they're used to working with clients and schedules, and Willie's an older brother. So, I think he's good at being in charge and telling people where to go when. So, but yeah, they're great. Kendall.
And Kendall was one of the ones they were really trying to work through how to manage the weather because it had been so warm. So she tried to sleep in the tent for a while, and she said, oh, I think it's cool enough now. I'm going to keep going. And she went on all the way, and she's finished now. So that seemed to work.
Yeah. Here's Matt and Janice.
Yeah, Matt came in with a broken piece of equipment on his bike rack. But they've managed to do a field repair. Some folks kind of made a plan about how to tie it together with some wire and some epoxy and got him to McGrath. So that was good. Because he's going to Nome, so he needed it to work. And this is the approach that you see when folks are just arriving. So you see them all the way across the lake. You see the headlamp and you say, oh, someone's almost here. And then 15 minutes later, they're still moving across the lake. but it's a beautiful approach. So I hope everyone turned around and took it in as they came in.
Huh.
And like I said all this already, but folks chose to kind of sleep out, so they set up tents, and we got busy. We had 2 busy nights, and just beautiful, clear nights. This is what it looked like from across the lake. So there was one guy who was doing the 150 who was hallucinating because the racers go so long and they're not sleeping. And he said for the last several miles coming into the checkpoint, he was seeing like subdivisions, like whole subdivisions of houses, just house after house, 2-level, cute little suburban houses. And he knew they weren't real. So then he was going by about twilight, and we had our twinkle lights on, so the tent was glowing. And he goes to just skip the checkpoint. He's just going to keep going. He doesn't turn up the approach trail. And the other volunteer, Tony, kind of ran after him, hollering, and got his attention to have him come over. And he came over and he said, "Oh, I saw you guys, but I thought you were a gazebo from my hallucinations because the gazebo lights." So I was just going to keep going. I didn't want to get off trail chasing a hallucination. So it worked out. But we were glad when he decided to stay and take a good nap, because I think he needed it.
Yeah. It's great. Those stars are just gorgeous too. You can see Orion.
Yeah,
Orion's belt right there.
So here every night. So it starts to look repetitive because it's the same thing every day, but there's a little bit of a rhythm. Folks come in overnight, they leave before dawn. Folks come in for breakfast, they have a snack and move on. Folks that come in over lunch tend to take a nap, anywhere from 90 minutes to 5 hours. Evening folks tend to come in and settle in to leave in the middle of the night. And then some folks come in very late, like 10, 11, midnight, and they sleep until the morning. And then those more folks are arriving. So it just continues to go and go and go. And the volunteers just take shifts where we go and sleep, like take a break when it's not going to be busy, and sleep for 5 or 6 hours, and then come in and tap out the other one, and they go and sleep. And then we're up together through the busy stretches. What was very helpful this year is that the lodge has Starlink now. So we could walk 4 minutes away from the checkpoint up to the lodge and hit ping, and the tracker would update, and then walk back down to the lodge and kind of have somewhat current data. We called it going up for a ping. So we could go and see where folks were and kind of make a plan and heat up enough videos and get their drop bags ready ahead of time, so we didn't have to go searching when they were there. We could just help take care of them.
Great.
Another beautiful day.
Oh, Scott.
Our first foot athlete.
Yep, he just won men's race.
He just won, yeah. More folks coming in, but anyone who sees this, I think that was Jim Vreeland who was riding a single speed.
Oh.
Anyone who sees photos will be jealous, because that's not typical weather at Finger Lake. This is Jonathan Christ. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, but we were laughing because I asked him, how much did your pack weigh at the start of the race? Because he didn't have a sled. None of the first, well, actually, I don't remember if Nick Jansen had a sled. I don't think so. I don't think any of the first 3 male skiers or the lead woman skier had a sled. They all just did a backpack.
Yeah, so I think you're right that Nick Jansen's a backpack guy.
Yeah, okay. I asked John here, how much does your pack weigh? And he said, "Oh, I didn't weigh it because I just didn't even want to know." I think that's Gavin coming in. So that was the lead 1,000. Yeah, that was Gavin coming in.
Okay.
He was our first 1,000-foot athlete.
Very cool.
And that's Tracie, who is the lead woman skier, who I think we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes because she just finished spectacularly. More boosters came in and gave us cookies off their plane. They followed the race last year as well. So they met some of the athletes that finished in McGrath, and then they came back looking for their friends as they went through.
Very cool.
So that was what the staff cabins looked like for the volunteers. That's the whole cabin. So it was cozy. You know, we had
that looks nice.
They had electricity and they had a wood stove. So if you were tenacious and made a fire, then you got to enjoy actually a heated cabin until you fell asleep and the fire went out.
Yeah.
And that's Dean Denter, foot athlete. I think he's getting close to the finish. He started a couple times before and was still working on dialing in everything. But this year it looks like his year. So very nice guy. I met him at Susitna last year.
Oh, great.
There's yet another perfect sunset and yet another beautiful aurora. Sorry, the beauty gets repetitive. Folks coming in the morning. So this is Eric Bissett and Daniel Hion. Eric is French and Daniel is from Quebec, or from Canada, but also speaks French. I assume he's from Quebec. And Eric had that huge grin on his face and he said it was so nice to have a conversation in French on the trail. He said he had limited English and he was just felt so good to have a conversation in French and his sleep. So he also, Eric is skiing to Nome, but he's done other disciplines on the trail. I don't remember if it was bike or foot. As he left Finger Lake, he strapped his skis onto his sled and put his ski boots away and put his trail runners on. He said, I know the trail to Puntilla. I'm not skiing 1 foot of it. He walked up to Puntilla. Yeah. And then his skis back up from there. And there we have Carrie and Peter. They're both going to Nome on foot this year. Carrie was the second woman foot through, but I think she might be in the lead now. And
Peter, the two women on foot are Magdalena and Kari.
Yes. Okay. I forget. I think Magdalena had come through and then Kari's caught up with her, but they're kind of moving right together. Peter already been to Nome on ski and on bike. So he's now going on foot to try to do all three. Which would be pretty.
He'll be the first person.
No, he'll be second because Josh ran ahead of him.
Okay.
Also doing the same thing this year, but Josh had already done foot and ski. So Josh learned to bike. And currently trying to bike to Nome, but biking is faster than foot. Actually, when Josh came in, he said, I can't believe I'm already at Finger Lake. I would normally be ordering food at Yetna.
Yeah.
So he was having a whole different experience than he's had in the past.
Yeah. Being a biker, I can't imagine like the pace of being on foot or the pace that it would take me to ski it. Like it's just so much slower.
Especially biking this year because it's so fast.
Yes.
I think like
for
probably
sure.
more exaggerated, but.
Oh, that's great. So Kari is the one who started Wild Winter Women. And so we're keeping it running while she's on the trail.
And she overlapped with Carol Sepulou in the tent for an hour and they were trading gear or trading kind of, foot cream and this and that and chatting about the next section. So Kari's a great mentor also, I think, to the other women.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Definitely.
Just sitting out in the sun in my shirt sleeves, enjoying my coffee. It was very sometimes it was quite crowded in the tent. So it was very nice that it was so moderate outside that I could just get out of everybody's way for an hour and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Just more. This is where we started having way more sleds, just piles of sleds.
Cool.
As pretty much all the bikers had gone through. This was Wednesday. So we had almost all of the foot athletes and all the skiers came through on Wednesday. And that was Jan and Petra. Petra's skis were decorated, I think, by her kids. There was little drawings in Sharpie and like children's drawings. The angles,
Oh,
you can
yeah.
see there's some drawings on there, which is quite cute. They're a couple that are skiing the course together this year. I think it's Jan, not Jan, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's Jan.
there's
Yeah,
our
I met
crowded.
him last year when he did the 1,000 and he was on skis, and he's such a nice, kind man. So it's fun to see him back and with his wife this time.
This is Jim Langford, who's he almost missed the Rhone checkpoint later. He had to turn and come back to it. Sonny posted an update, but he was having a little bit of trouble with a lot of the foot athletes. Actually, were saying this. They're having trouble with their trail runners that they'd studded because the glare ice of the Yetna was just like so. It was so much impact. Like every step was just glare ice that they really wish they had put more padding. Their insoles had been more padded to protect their feet from the studs, because typically you're on like a mix of kind of snow and like ice, and the studs are only kind of gripping when you need them, like every steps. But just 2 straight days on the Yetna had really done people's feet in. So this Jim actually, he had a pair of unstudded boots and then a pair of studded trail runners, and he said, these things are killing my feet and they're too small. I hate them. Here. And he handed them to me and I tried them on and they fit perfectly. So I got a brand new pair of nice studded trail runners, thanks to Jim Langford. Thank you, Jim Langford. He said,
So
I
then
said, I
what,
can mail him. He said, I don't want him back. I never want to see him again.
so did he have another pair of shoes with him?
Yeah, he had brought like a kind of a pair of hiking boots, like lightweight water Gore-Tex hiking boots. It looks like Keens or something. And he's like, I'm just going to finish in these. And I have Catula micro spikes that I'm going to use when I need it for ice. I can't take one more step in those studded trail runners. My bottoms of my feet have are done in. That's why he had his feet.
That's great. And you're in the right spot at the right time. That's a funny story.
Yeah, with the right size foot.
Yeah.
A lot of enjoying the weather. So this is Stacy Fisk and Melanie Vriesman. And they're traveling together. Like they planned they're going to do the race together and they're staying together. And so they were really funny. They were such a cute pair of friends. But they were talking about which next parts of the trail we're going to make which of them grumpy when. So who was going to need to be the cheerleader for the other, like kind of planning out, I don't like hills and I don't like this. And so I'll cheer for you then and you cheer for me then. And also, we had a lot of athletes at this point on Wednesday changing their plans because we found out snow was moving in the next day. So we'd had a number of folks who had come to Finger Lake and planned to take a longer break. And then they heard that snow was moving in and they don't want to get stuck on our side of the pass. So they have to get up to Puntilla, which is about 30 miles, and then over the pass, which is another 18 miles before the weather would get too poor. So folks were going to take longer breaks. They shortened their breaks or made a plan to kind of push on a bit quicker than they had originally anticipated to be sure that they didn't get stuck and be forced to scratch due to the conditions.
Yeah.
So these were a couple like, okay, well, we're going to rest. So now we have to push. So that's going to make us grumpy. Ate it over. They were still going. So
yeah,
good job.
Great.
And that was our last skier skiing off. And then we had our final arrivals. I think these are pictures of the tussocks. So then folks started to get into the tussocks and they were sending back pictures to us so we could kind of share conditions. These actually came from Carl Schiller, who was one of the front bikers. He was like probably in the top 5 or 6 male bikers in the 350. So when he sent back conditions photos, we could start to share them with folks so they could understand what they were in for.
Cool.
This is not Finger Lake.
No.
Finger Lake is buried in snow. There's us.
Nice. Beautiful.
Yeah, so this was some of the last arrivals. Sarah Herkett and Carla. I can't recall her last name.
Gabrielson.
But Gabrielson. Carla had a really bad accident with her sled knocking her over before hooligans. She got into hooligans and they thought maybe she'd broken her kneecap. So everyone was saying, "Oh, I think this person's scratched." They were telling us like, "Oh, this person, they really hurt their leg. They're scratched." And I said, "I haven't heard that officially. Like, I think she's still coming." And she got to our checkpoint. And she said that her kneecap it was not broken. It was just very swollen, it was swelled. So when she got to checkpoint, she had to just put her leg up in the air so it would drain. But it was like big and black and blue. And she just said, "No, I'm pushing through." And she each day it was getting a little better. And her finish line was Puntilla. So because she was doing the 150 mile distance. So she got to us and she said, "Okay, one more push and I'm going to get to my finish line." But her leg, she couldn't really like bend her leg that great. So she couldn't get in and out of her sleeping bag. So she was just sleeping on the floor and she came and sat next to me at the fire and she said, "I'm so cold, but I can't get in and out of my sleeping bag." So we got her under a big parka, which she just tucked under in a little ball like an egg and slept under my parka as her blanket and she got some good sleep. So that hopefully that was helpful in getting her to the finish, which she did finish. So
yeah, that sounds so painful, and I give her so much credit for pushing through that.
Yeah, wild.
Yeah.
And you'll see here Sarah holding her sled. Sarah is the only one who pushes her sled.
Right.
So everyone ties their sled to a backpack or a hip belt harness and pulls it behind them. But Sarah holds onto it and pushes it like a shopping cart. And she said it works great. So I hadn't seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
And then our last two arrivals is Klaus and
Donald Kane.
Yes, Donald Kane. Yeah. Very, very funny couple. They said, "Of course we're last. We're always last." Though they're not in last now. They moved ahead of some folks, but they pride themselves on taking long breaks at their checkpoints. So they were very happy to get in. And then the whole final group made a pact. They said, "Okay, we're all going to go to bed and we're all going to get up at 1 a.m. No one can get up before 1 a.m. because then we'll just hear you rustling and you'll disturb our sleep." So that was great for me as a volunteer because I knew when to set my alarm to come down and make coffee.
Mm-hmm. And then can you tell the story about Klaus the dog?
Oh yeah. I think did I mention it? Oh, no, I must have said that before we got started recording.
I think so.
One of I think I mentioned because we went on a sled dog ride before the racers started coming in. The Winter Lake Lodge, which is the lodge that's based here on Finger Lake, the reason there's the airstrip and the kitchen and the caretakers and the outhouses, the Winter Lake Lodge has a resident team of sled dogs. And in the winter, they give rides to guests. And in the summer, they live on a glacier. And then they take the guests by helicopter to give them a ride over on a nearby glacier at a remote camp. And so one of the litters of puppies are all, the first names all start with the letter K. And one of the puppies' names, it's 3 years old. It's not a puppy, but dog's names is Klaus, spelled exactly the same as Klaus the racer. So the Winter Lake Lodge caretakers said the whole race they'd been cheering for Klaus and watching his dot on the map because they were like, "That's the name of our sled dog." So when Klaus arrived at Finger Lake, I showed him a picture. I said, "There's a sled dog here that's also named after you, and everyone here is cheering for you because your name is the same as the dog." And Klaus said it made him so happy. He lit up. I had to airdrop him photos of the dog, and he wanted to meet the dog at 2 a.m. We said, "I don't think we could do that." But he said, "Oh, this is so good to know. Now, whenever I want, I can retire from this race because there will be a Klaus on the Iditarod Trail." It's very cute.
That is great.
And so I think the last few photos are that group sleeping till 1 a.m. And then when we came down to meet them, there was a storm level aurora. So we gave them coffee. Tony and I, the other volunteer, we just stood outside and stared up at the heavens for an hour while they all got ready. We had pulsing and reds and greens, and it was just an amazing show to see them out the door.
Wonderful. Wow.
It was the same show that they saw at Rowan that I think they shared on social media channels, but Sunny has a better camera than me. So her photos are absolutely phenomenal. Mine are just iPhone.
Those are great. Oh, I love that. Like looking up.
Sitting straight overhead. It felt like it was pouring in from the top and like spilling down like a dome in every direction around us.
And this is basically sending off the last of the racers.
Yeah, I had a video
Cool.
of them going, but it's on video very hard to capture without professional gear. So
Yeah.
they got to go out the door right under the lights.
Wonderful.
That was them.
Good. And that's the end of it.
Yeah, I think I have some photos of breaking down, but that's not that interesting. So
yeah,
to share all that, anything else.
Great. Good. Yeah, well, thank.
In story the whole week was just the weather, like just how, and it made it easy for us as volunteers. There was not very much first aid, and you know, we had the last racers out 12 hours before the cutoff when they needed to be in, so we got to break down early, and I think they're seeing more hardships in the second half of the course for weather and conditions than they saw in the first half.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Well, thank you for telling us. No, that's wonderful to hear all about life at the checkpoint and the stories that came out of it. That is just great. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course.
So then I have some updates. Yesterday on the YouTube channel, we talked to Kate Coward, who was the second place women's finisher on bike. And so we didn't talk about who had finished in the last day. And so we have a bunch of, kind of news to cover, and then also talking about a number of the finishers who have finished really in the last 2 days, and kind of some of what's going on in the 1,000-mile race a little bit. So I'm just going to run through some of the info. Laura, feel free to jump in with stories.
Oh, I can't hear you again. Did you mute?
Can you hear me now?
Might just be me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry. Good. So feel free to just jump in as I'm going through all this. So the exciting news from today is that Tracie Curry finished in the women's ski race, and she got a women's course record by more than a day. I actually think it was like 25 hours. So congratulations and great job to Tracie. Very exciting to see that course record come down. That was set just 2 years ago by Robin Beebe and Christy Marvin. So kudos to you. We saw our men's foot winner in the 350, Scott Hoberg, which is especially fun to see, him doing so well in the event after, when he was here some number of years ago and got so close to a finish and a win right before the end. So kudos to Scott. We're pumped. And then racer Stuart Banks was, when he was near about 20 miles before the Nikolai checkpoint, he left the trail, but then did make his way back. And then just recently I've heard that he made it to the Nikolai checkpoint. So he seems to be in good shape. So I'm going to talk about the finishers since kind of in the last 48 hours since Thursday evening. So we saw Tim Olson and Chris Olson finish. They live in Wasilla and Big Lake, respectively. They're a father-son duo. They finished Thursday night, and they're both rookies in the 350. Overnight on Thursday, we saw these folks come in. Cameron Rainey from Boulder, Colorado. He also goes by Cam. He was one of the two who did the bonus miles, bypassing Rainy Pass, kind of going over to Hell's Gate, and then turned around. Just massive detour. It's a good thing he's such a strong, fast biker that it didn't take him longer than it did. He's a rookie on bike. And then also Philip Rodley from Winnipeg. He went with Cameron on the detour. This is Philip's second finish on bike. Tonight I have my Canadian flag pin on my vest from a mutual friend of ours, Alan Dixon in Winnipeg. Henriette Giel was the sixth woman on bike in the 350. She's a rookie from Norway. And then yesterday morning, that's Friday morning, we saw Derek Says come in. He's a rookie from Geneseo, Illinois. Tucker Costain was the first men's skier. So he won in an impressively fast time of 4 days, 16 hours, and 56 minutes. That's the unofficial time. Only 3 people have finished on skis under 5 days in the history of the race in the past 23 years. And he finished with a pole and a stick. So one of his poles broke before Butterfly Lake. Did you do you know about this?
Of him skiing in. I should have saved it to that photo roll. He's just rolling in and with his ski pole in one hand and what we called his wizard staff in the other hand.
Mm-hmm.
He's just skiing in at like 4 miles an hour with it. Unbelievably skier. He's also wearing alpine touring boots,
right?
Which all skiers were very interested to see how his feet were going to fare with that. So we'll have to get a post-race report.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that improvised pole looked like he did a great job. I have to imagine it was like maybe heavy, but he found a good stick for it.
And it didn't have a poke in the ground, really, so he wasn't able to like plant it in. But
yeah, or like a wrist strap.
Then you can, I guess, make anything work.
Yeah. And one cool thing about Tucker is he did have a fast time. And every racer has a reason to get to the finish line as typically as fast and efficiently as they can. But for him in particular, one reason was because his partner is mushing the Iditarod dog sled race, which starts in Fairbanks tomorrow on Sunday. And so the original plan with the Iditarod on the traditional route was that he would finish the race in McGrath and then be there when she came through. Although because of low snow, the dog sled race moved the route to start at Fairbanks and not go through McGrath. So that left Tucker in a bind. So he had to get to Fairbanks in time with limited options out of McGrath. So they take the last scheduled flight out of McGrath at 3:00 Friday afternoon. So in any case, great job, Tucker, getting it all done. Hope your partner has a great race in the Iditarod. Very exciting. The next finisher was Kendall Park from St. Louis, Missouri. She's 7th woman. She's always a super strong rider, talented, knows a lot about a lot of things. So great job to you, Kendall. This is her second finish.
A lot of her own gear, like modifies her gear a lot. So she's always tinkering and inventing new, trying to optimize her setup in ways that are really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's helped me by cluing me into some like fabrics that I wasn't really aware of before that are great, like wicking layers and then insulating layers. She's borrowing a parka of mine right now because she wants to, it's actually the parka that I wore last year at the ITI, because she wants to sew something and she wants to use my parka as a pattern for it. So, yeah, very, very creative individual. Midday yesterday on Friday, we saw Jillian Welch from Whitehorse, Yukon. She was the 8th woman on bike. She's a rookie. Mark Sellen from Anchorage, also a rookie. And then this afternoon, so it's Saturday afternoon, Nina Stepples from Westport, New Zealand came in. She has one finish in the 150 and one in the 350. Doug Dunlap from Calgary. This might be his second time. I looked back in the results as I was preparing for this, and I saw that there was a Doug Dunlap with the exact same spelling of the name in the results from 2002. So I'm curious to know if it's the same Doug Dunlap 23 years later, but that would be pretty cool if it were. And then Nicholas Jansen from Fairbanks, we mentioned him. He's from Fairbanks, Alaska. This is his second ski finish. And he was a second place ski finisher, and he won the 350 ski race last year. Scott Parizo from St. Mary's Point, Minnesota. Those of you from Minnesota, it's near Afton.
He was the only one that we didn't have his drop bag in Finger Lake. He gave me his name and it just was not there. So he was a very good sport about it. And we had boxes and boxes of extra gear and batteries and hot hands. So we did not send him away empty-handed, but he didn't get his preferred snacks. Luckily, it never preclude his finish.
Yeah, and it never turned up.
No, I said maybe he was going to have 2 in Rhone, but we didn't have it. So
yeah,
Sorry.
Great. And then last night at 8, or last night, Scott Hoberg from, like I said, from Duluth, Minnesota, came through as a men's 350 winner on foot. Overnight, we saw Casey Bredesen. He's a rancher from northeastern North Dakota. Then Sean McDermott, whose nickname is Porcupine, was the second man on foot from Leesburg, Virginia. So before the race, our group sent out a survey to folks to provide some information, just like kind of fun facts about themselves, a little bit about their motivation. So we were asked, why did he want to come to the ITI? And the reason was because he listened to the 10 Junk Miles podcast with Scott Hoberg as a guest, recounting his misadventure at ITI, and then he decided that he had to try it. So I just think that's so cool that Sean would have chosen to come in the year when Scott was also there, and Scott finished just right ahead of him. And I'm sure they saw each other a lot on the trail. So I think that's really cool. As his day job as a West Virginia lawyer, he had 2 arguments before the West Virginia Supreme Court the day before his flight to Alaska. So
talk about compartmentalization.
Yeah. So hopefully this was a relaxing change. So this morning, Beth Freymiller finished. She's also a friend of mine. She's a woman on bike from Cottage Grove, Minnesota. She's a rookie. And then Laura, you said she wasn't feeling very well at Finger Lake.
Yeah, a lot of times winter ultras, people get a cough and you don't know why. So you can get cold damage to your actual cilia in your lungs. Scott Jansen's dealt with that in the past. You might be sick. Sometimes people get a pulmonary edema. We've had people kind of get airlifted off the trail. So when Beth came in, she just had a pretty racking cough that she couldn't, she said it came out of nowhere, and she was having a very hard time sleeping. So we got her some cold medicine, which seemed to set her up. She got some good rest and said she was going to continue on to the next checkpoint, and then she made it to the finish. So we were really happy to see her find a second wind, and hope she gets some good recovery now that she's off trail.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah. Great job, Beth, pushing through that. Jonathan Kreist was the 3rd skier man and he's from Fairbanks, Alaska. You had said that he had some tough blisters.
Yeah, he was really having some trouble with a lot of different blisters on his feet. I think the warm conditions were part of that. It's a lot of moisture management when it's so warm, both from sweat and from wetness. So we did some blister triage at Finger Lake and got him set up with wet ones, antiseptic, to keep the blisters from getting infected. So it got him to the finish, or something got him to the finish. He got himself to the finish, but we're glad to see those blisters didn't take him out.
Yeah, great. And then midday today, Tracie Curry, who, like we said, was the first woman skier, came in. She's from Fairbanks, Alaska. And you said that when she didn't come into the tent at Finger Lake.
She came into the tent for a minute and she goes, "Oh, it's way too warm in here." So she just sat outside and had a little picnic and kind of handed me her trash, and she kept apologizing. She was so sweet. I was like, "That's literally why I'm here. Like, anything I can do to help." So stay for very long before she was ready to be on her way. But she was a very, very gracious guest while we had her.
Yeah, great. And then the last 2 to finish, Amanda Harvey and Lynn Hall, they were riding together, women, both on bike. Amanda is from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Lynn is from Leadville, Colorado. This is Amanda's 2nd finish in the 350. She was also in the race in 2023 for people who know the race history, kind of a legendary night when it was 30 below on the Susitna River. The very first night of the race, the air went out of her tires. There were a number of us who were trying to help her, but her through axle grease was so stiff we couldn't get the through axle. I think it was back in that we were having trouble with after putting tubes in her tires. It was kind of a disastrous night. What she ended up doing, because at a certain point her wheels wouldn't turn, like she couldn't even push her bike. So she ended up disassembling it and then putting it on her back, strapping it to her back, and then walking all the way to Yentna. So if you've seen the pictures of a woman with a bike on her back from that year, that is her. So happy to see her get her 2nd finish. And then she met Lynn at the ITI camp. the previous year, and then they rode the whole thing together.
Yeah, and Lynn also started in 2023, but she got like food poisoning in Squat now, or like norovirus, so she had to scratch then. And then,
Oh,
yeah, we're glad to have her back as well.
hmm, yeah, great. So that's it for the racers in the 350. There are some in the 1,000. So at this point, all of the bikers in the 1,000 have come into and left the McGrath checkpoint. And at this point, all of the people on foot and the one on skis are not yet to McGrath, although Gavin Hennigan, maybe since we've been talking, has reached McGrath, or maybe he's not quite there yet, but he'll be there tonight. And so just briefly, I want to go through the 1,000-mile racers who arrived in McGrath since midday yesterday. And they all left this morning, people who I'm going to talk about. And so just I'm going to go through them briefly because they're going to be on the trail for another week or two. So we have time to spend a little bit more time talking about them. But Thomas Miller is from Edmonton, Alberta. This is the second time in the 1,000. He finished it last year on bike. I would describe him as steady, strong, and cheerful. Matt Garrison from Park City, Utah, has 2 finishes in the 350, and he's a rookie in the 1,000. Carl Booth from the UK, this is his first time in the 1,000. He has been riding with Julie Perilla Garcia since the beginning, keeping each other company. He's a great guy. And then Julie Perilla Garcia is from Grand Junction, Colorado, formerly of Anchorage. She has 2 finishes in the 350, and this is her second crack at the 1,000. She was in the 1,000 in 2023, and I got to ride with her a bit, but unfortunately she was forced out of the Iditarod checkpoint, which is kind of like the midpoint of the 1,000, with a knee injury. So that was unfortunate, but now she goes again. And then Matt Tanaka and Janice Tower are a brother-sister duo from Anchorage. And Janice has been at this longer than anybody I know. I know that there were people in it before, but she's one of the first like women who I like ever like saw who did races like this. When she came to Minnesota for the Arrowhead 135 15 years ago, in 2010. So I was volunteering that year, and I just remember when she came into the cabin, it was just like a really cool moment, like just to see someone from Alaska who did races like this. I was just like so like just amazed and impressed and fangirl, and like it was just really cool. So she's still at it, which is awesome. And this is her first time in the 1,000. Matt, and actually she competed in the 354 times with her first time in 2002. So Matt's done the 350 3 times starting in 2019. So he's much, just very recent to the sport compared to his sister. And then you had said that his rear rack broke. It was field fixed at Finger Lake. At Speedway Bikes in Anchorage, they field tested how best to fix it based on what he had with him in his repair kit, which is awesome. And then with race director approval, they overnighted the parts to him in McGrath. So now presumably that's been fixed and he's on his way. And then last but not least, Ryan Wanless from South Dakota. He has 3 finishes in the 1,000, 1 on foot and 2 on bike. So they are all headed further, left McGrath, headed to Takotna, and then into the interior, and then up towards the Yukon River. So I think that's all that I have for tonight. This has ended up going long, but it's a lot of really fun stories and fun pictures and lots of great information. And also tonight there's a update going out on Wild Winter by the Wild Winter Women group, and that's going to go on social media and then also on the ITI website. And also just social media. Wild Winter Women on Instagram is putting stuff out, and then ITI Alaska on Instagram. And
right,
what's that?
Instagram and Facebook story for the ITI account.
Yep. Great. So lots of news, even though a lot of people have finished, there's still a ton out on the trail. That's one of the things that's kind of struck me about this year is with only, there are 104 people who started and only 4 drops. So that's 100 people who are out there. So that's a lot. That's really exciting. Any feedback you have or watchers, listeners have is appreciated. Like what what you want to hear more about, what you want to make sure we cover in a future episode. So thank you to Laura for joining us, and hope that everyone listening has a great night.
The loudest plane ever flew over right when you were saying thank you, so I couldn't say thank you back. Oh. But thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good night, everybody.